On map the I-5. You not think such a thing is worth a man's life. But if a man tests my style, I promise he won't like my reply. Boom, bye bye, like bonjour, I'm crucial. I'm a Brooklyn boy, I may take some getting used to. Chain snatching, ain't have it, gotta get it. Same shit it, from Brownsville to Great British. Fatherless child, mama put double shifts, so the number runners was the only one to hang with it. Before you know it, I'm in the game, bang fit it. Fit no orangutans, fit it with kidnaps like oranguses, some dangerous things. Tell me what the name of this shit. The black hoodie rap. There's no fear in my eyes when they looking at. Gotta look on map. Besides, me not like the I-5. Me not think such a thing is worth a man's life. But if a man tests my style, I promise he won't like my reply. Boom, bye bye, like bonjour, I'm crucial. I'm a Brooklyn boy, I may take some getting used to. Chain snatching, ain't have it, gotta get it. Same shit it, from Brownsville to Great British. Fatherless child, mama put double shifts, so the number runners was the only one to hang with it. Before you know it, I'm in the game, bang fit it. Fit no orangutans, fit it with kidnaps like oranguses, some dangerous things. Tell me what the name of this shit. It's a black hoodie rap. There's no fear in my eyes when they looking at. Gotta look on map. Besides, me not like the I-5. Me not think such a thing is worth a man's life. But if a man tests my style, I promise he won't like my reply. Boom, bye bye, like bonjour, I'm crucial. I'm a Brooklyn boy, I may take some getting used to. Chain snatching, ain't have it, gotta get it. Get it from Brownsville to Great British. Fatherless child, mama put double shifts, so the number runners was the only one to hang with it. Before you know it, I'm in the game, bang fit it. Fit no orangutans, fit it with kidnaps like oranguses, some dangerous things. Tell me what the name of this shit.
Good one. I am Brooklyn Democratic Party Chair Rodneyce B. Short Herman, and I'm so excited to start off another one of our annual party issues and policies meetings. Is Brooklyn in the house? We have a packed crowd tonight. Well, a virtual crowd, I should say, an exciting evening ahead. First, I'd like to thank you for attending our Brooklyn Democratic Party's 2023-2024 Policies and Issues meeting. Your input is incredibly valuable. We are here to discuss and advance issues and topics you've decided matter most for bettering Brooklyn. I know we just wrapped up the general election, so some of you might want a little break from politics, but there are so many opportunities to build on momentum of our monumental victories and make this New Year's Brooklyn's best year. About 2024, it is only 6 weeks away. Time flies. And I don't have to remind you that some of the most important elections of our lifetime are right around the corner. As these elections approach, we have an enlightenment evening for you on vital topics that will help us both Brooklyn Blue and improve our communities. The party has gotten overwhelming feedback on issues you would like to advance, and I'd like to thank all of you and your input. We've gathered experts to discuss these pressing topics impacting every corner of our borough, including housing, election reform, climate change, and so forth. First, we're talking about housing in New York City and Brooklyn. Especially, it is an issue that affects all of us deeply. Rising rent prices and shortages are forcing residents out, making our borough harder to live in, and hitting our lifelong Brooklynites the most. There are pathways for a better Brooklyn, and as the Assembly Majority Whip, I can tell you we are implementing significant legislation, and as party leader, I know we have lawmakers at every level of government, from Hakeem Jeffries to Chuck Schumer to many more here today on your side. We're here for your ideas and input. So as we discuss putting a roof over every head and pathways to affordable housing, I encourage you to share your voices and opinions during your Q&A session and breakout rooms. Tonight, we're also focusing on the future of our planet, our communities, and the world our children will grow up in. Brooklynites have overwhelmingly shared their concerns about environmental issues and sustainability, and we're going to chart a path forward together. I look forward to hearing your thoughts as we create policies for sustainable futures and, of course, for environmental equity. Together, we'll be creating a long-term actionable plan to make Brooklyn the leader in being healthier and greener. I know you're excited to start, so I'll let the meeting get started. I'd like to thank all of our executive team, our staff, our district leaders, and all of you as we build a better and brighter Brooklyn. Thank you so much and have a great session.
Madam Chair, fellow district leaders, members of the Brooklyn Democratic Party, fellow Democrats, and esteemed guests, good evening. My name is Arlene Alvarado Macala. I'm a district leader in the 54th Assembly District, which covers Bushwick, Cypress Hills, East New York, and City Line. I am also the Brooklyn Democratic Party County Committee Chair. It is with pleasure that I welcome you to the Brooklyn Democratic Party Issues and Policies Forum meeting. The Brooklyn Democratic Party continues to build on the ideas of unity by continuously looking for ways in which we can work together to keep all Brooklynites informed and make our party stronger. Looking ahead into the 2024 elections, we must recognize that a divided party cannot effectively champion the causes that matter most to Brooklynites. Our strength lies in the unity, and to achieve that, we need to engage in open, honest, and sometimes uncomfortable conversations. It's time to build a legacy of unity, to lay the foundation for a party that reflects the diversity in voices within our communities. While the path to unity may be challenging, the rewards are immeasurable. We must rise above the discord, actively seeking common ground, and committing to mediating our differences. This is not just a political imperative. It is a moral obligation to the voters who trust us to be their advocates and representatives. Let us consider the greater good that is at stake: our party, our state, and our country, who suffer when we allow divisions to fester. It is incumbent upon us to bridge the gaps, find common ground, and mediate where needed. Only through this concentrated effort can we build a party that is not only strong, but also reflective of the diverse voices within our communities. Before we move into our discussions of the night, I ask for a brief moment of silence to honor the trailblazers who, through their sacrifices, secure our right to vote. Additionally, let us remember the victims of all wars, past and present, who have paid the ultimate price for our freedoms. Thank you. This evening, we bring you panelists that will speak about climate justice and affordable housing. To that end, I would like to introduce district leaders Shaquana Boykin, who will be our moderator during the climate justice discussion, followed by District Leader Igor Galanter, who will be our moderator during the affordable housing discussion. Thank you for your participation in this forum, and I hope that you find this evening's information valuable and are able to share it with those of you who cannot join us. Once again, welcome and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Arlene. Hello, everyone. Sorry for my background. I'm outside, almost home, so this won't happen again. But I want to thank everyone for being here again. And I want to introduce our panelist who's going to be here talking. So I will be in a climate justice, Shaquana Boykin, a district leader in 7, female. We have affordable housing, we have Igor, and for the 2 breakout rooms, we have Dion on climate, and for the other breakout room, we have Renee. So we're gonna start with issue 1.
Kenneth Gould is a professor of sociology and urban sustainability at Brooklyn College and professor of sociology and earth and environmental sciences at the CUNY Graduate Center. His work is focused on problems of sustainable development and environmental justice. His most recent book is Green Gentrification, Urban Sustainability and the Struggle for Environmental Justice. Dr. Gould is a native Brooklynite, and his current research addresses issues of urban coastal climate resilience and adaptation. I'm going to turn the mic over to Kenneth Gould, who is going to say a few words and introduce his work.
Hi, thanks for having me tonight. I'm really excited about this opportunity to share some ideas, and I'm glad that we've coupled the climate justice issue with the affordable housing issue because they're related. I'm going to share my screen for a minute. If I can. I see my sharing screen is disabled. Okay. Maybe I'm not going to share my screen. I'll just talk. The key climate threats to New York City are heat stress, intense precipitation, such as we saw last month with an 8-inch rainfall, and sunny day flooding, as well as storm surge. Intense precipitation impacts on New York City include flooding of our transportation networks, our roadways, our subway stations, our railways, our airports. We saw all of those affected last month as well. We also have the problem of overwhelming our sewer systems, combined sewer overflows, which affect our harbor water quality and our drainage capacity. And there's also the deadly problem of flooding basement apartments. And we were lucky we didn't have any drowning deaths in this last event. Now, intense precipitation doesn't affect everybody evenly, right? Basement apartments flood, higher apartments don't. People's capacity to relocate temporarily is based on their income and their cash flow. People's mobility, if people have mobility issues, it's much harder to escape the intense precipitation. And people whose work is transit dependent are also highly affected. In terms of coastal flooding vulnerability, here we're talking about sea level rise. People's ability to evacuate is, distributed unevenly. You need the financial capacity to temporarily relocate. Your quality of housing, the resilience of your housing is going to make a difference. Your dependence on public services. If you're dependent on NYCHA properties, right, that's going to be an issue. Access to insurance.
Ken, you can share your screen now.
I can? Okay, great. Let me try that. Let me see. People see that? Yeah, okay. So again, coastal flooding vulnerability, access to insurance, credit, and FEMA services is not evenly distributed to everybody in our community. And the capacity to structurally mitigate housing that will be wet proofing, dry proofing, raising structures, all of that depends on wealth. In terms of sunny day flooding vulnerability, again, cheaper housing tends to be on flood prone streets. So who's affected by a sunny day flooding is often people of lower income. If you can work from home, so you don't have to get to work during sunny day flooding, that's fine, but most people can't work from home. Flood proofing home costs are very expensive. Mold remediation is expensive. If people need some kind of healthcare access, it's impeded by the sunny day flooding. People can't get to whatever medical care that they need. Access to credit for home repairs is again unevenly distributed in our community, and access to insurance. So sunny day flooding vulnerability is also a variable in our community. In terms of heat vulnerability, people with air conditioning will do better, especially if they have electricity. We have cooling centers and people can get to them unless they have mobility issues. And so that's a real problem for people. If we have electricity failures and people are on upper floors of apartment buildings and they have mobility issues, we can't get them out of their apartments necessarily to get to cooling centers. So these are the people who are most vulnerable, often the elderly. Street trees make a big difference in the urban heat island effect. So the distribution of street trees really matters. And there are places without street trees that are going to feel the effects of the heating much more acutely. Green spaces are terrific mitigators for the urban heat island effect. But again, our green space distribution is not even. I know we've done work on park equity, but we can certainly do more of that. And again, people's ability to evacuate. We don't really worry about people who are going to their houses in the Hamptons or in the Hudson Valley, but that's a small portion of our population that has that luxury. And I just want to conclude by saying that affordable housing is the key to all this. So pairing climate justice and affordable housing together tonight really makes a lot of sense, because affordable quality housing will mitigate a lot of the vulnerabilities in terms of climate justice. And so affordable housing should be thought of as critical to climate justice, not a separate issue. And thank you. I'm glad to participate in question and answer.
I'm so sorry. Can you hear me?
Can now.
Okay. So thank you so much. We had a few questions for you if you can answer. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Um, I mean, you kind of answered some of them, but if you want to go into it more, what are the key intersections between climate justice and environmental sustainability? And how can we ensure that our efforts address both issues comprehensively?
Sure, and that's an important question, a real problem. My most recent book was on green gentrification, right? So we know we need to green the city. Most people live in cities. The cities are the key to making a go of it in the Anthropocene with climate change. But greening the cities often leads to increased inequality, and especially housing inequality, which is something we really can't afford to amplify in this city, obviously. We've done some great work on greening the city, but at the same time, we've had decreasing access to affordable housing. Those things are not unrelated. So whenever you add environmental amenities to a community, be it a new park or park access, bike lanes, even something small like a community garden, it tends to have a positive impact on property values, right? So being close to those environmental amenities raises the value of property, which means that's going to raise the cost of housing. Landlords can get more for those properties because they have those environmental amenities next to them or near them within access. Homeowners are more likely to sell if their property is valued more because now it's next to a park. So the real question is, how do we green the city without making it more unequal? Because if we raise, for instance, when we restored Prospect Park, which is a beautiful thing, and Prospect Park is lovely now in a way that it wasn't in the 70s and 80s, but the result of that has been gentrification around the park. And so while we've improved the park, the people who live around the park are now more likely to be white, more likely to be college educated, more likely to be wealthy, right? And so while we have nice park access, it's been distributed to the whiter and wealthier members of our population. So how do we avoid that? And one of the ways we avoid that is by securing the affordable housing before we do the greening, right? So if you're going to put in a new park, make sure you have secured affordable housing. If developers are building in there, make sure there's a high percentage of affordable housing. Sometimes you can do this with land trusts. There are many mechanisms available, but we have to think about that in terms of sequencing in policy. Don't green before you can secure the affordable housing, because we know what housing markets will do. They'll automatically raise the cost of housing near those amenities, and so it negatively redistributes environmental amenities to people who can afford it. And we want those amenities to be available to everybody, right? So the sequencing matters. Like you see that in Greenpoint, where they're still building out the park, but the luxury towers have gone in and already displaced people, right? So you have to think about, so I think the key to this is we want to plan to green the city, and we need to be securing affordable housing all along the way as part of that process. So you can't think of them separately or things will become more unequal.
I just want to add one clarifying question to that. When you say secure affordable housing first, can you go into that just a little more?
Sure. So we want to make sure that people who already are in affordable housing and can live there can stay there, right? So we don't want people to get priced out, right? So that's things like, and I know all of these are difficult policy choices, but we're talking about things like rent control, or for the elderly, for SCREE, right? There's a bunch of things that we can do to make sure that people don't get priced out as soon as the amenities go in. If there's a plan, as there often are plans, to green and to develop an area, with real estate development, make sure you secure higher proportions of affordable housing in those developments. And rather than making it a citywide lottery, which we often do for access to the affordable housing, make sure that the people who live in that community are on the first in line to get that affordable housing, right? Because you don't want to displace people. And that's often what happens. We displace people, because the housing prices went up. Then we build affordable housing, and then new people can come in, and it's a mixed income neighborhood. Well, we got that, but we didn't secure a stable neighborhood. That is, the longtime residents of the neighborhood are not still there, right? They've been forced to go somewhere else, and people got priced out somewhere else, move in there. And we really want to, I think ideally what we want is secure, mixed income, mixed race, mixed ethnicity neighborhoods that are stable over time, where families can develop, people know each other, people know the shop owners, right? I mean, that's the kind of quality of neighborhood I grew up in Brooklyn and Flatbush.
Thank you. I'm going to read off another question. How can policy, going into affordable housing question, how can policy frameworks be designed to promote not only environmental sustainability, but also social equity, ensuring that the benefits and burdens of climate action are distributed fairly? So I do know you said we have to work on how affordable housing is obtained, like newly affordable housing, and securing the affordable housing we already have. Is there anything else, especially when you talk about social equity, that like could help with that?
Well, absolutely. I mean, when we think about environmental justice, it's not just outcomes, right? The distributional justice at the end, but there's procedural justice, right? So very often how people experience greening is people from outside of a community come in and have an idea about how somebody else's community can be greened and how can it be improved, right? And they may be very well-meaning people who are trying to make everything better, right? So it's not a knock on them, but you need to talk to the people who live in that community, who know that community, who are there. What are their needs? What does greening mean to them? What do they need a bike lane? Do they want a bike lane? Is that the thing? Do they need, green space for community gardens? Maybe that's more important. I don't know what the needs are. They need green jobs in a walk to work community. So the communities that are most successful at resisting the inequality that can come with greening are the ones that have longstanding community organizations. They're the ones that have developed their own positive vision of what the future of their community is, right? And then they come to you, they come to the electeds, and they say, this is our positive vision of a green community, what greening means to our neighborhood, and we would like you to help us to realize that. So a lot of the work is talking to people about what greening means, right? And greening might be, addressing the rat problem, right? You don't know, like we all have our own visions of what greening is in a community, and they come from our own positionality and our own experiences. So I think a key part of this is there should be long discussions, positive discussions with members of the community, made available when people again, like you're having this meeting, at 7 p.m. That's great. That's what, people can participate in that. So at a place where people can feel comfortable, at a time when people can participate, if it's in person where people can bring their kids, and it's a lot of work. It takes time, right, to talk. I mean, I don't need to tell you that, working with the community and with the neighborhood and with constituents takes time, and you need to get to know people and help them to tease out what greening really means to them, because it doesn't mean the same thing to everybody everywhere.
Thank you for that. Especially when you talked about talking to the community. I'm also finding that sometimes what we think greening is, or what we state greening or affordable housing is, our community don't define it the same. So I do agree with like having that conversation. So thank you for that. And I also want to ask another question. What role do businesses and industries play in advancing climate justice? And how can we encourage sustainable practices that are not only economically viable, but also socially responsible?
Right, and it's a complicated question because there's such a wide range of businesses, and what kinds of businesses are we talking about? But an interesting example is what we're doing with transportation in New York and in progressive cities around the country, in thinking about what do the streets mean, sort of taking the streets a little bit more away from cars and giving them a little bit more to communities and to people. And initially, business owners are often concerned that if you reduce street automobile traffic, that's going to negatively affect. If there's less parking, there's less driving, that's going to negatively affect businesses. And what we find when we make a pedestrian street, or limit traffic on a street, is that pedestrian traffic increases and businesses do better, right? And so it's important to work with the business community when you're doing community planning for urban greening, that we bring them on board so that they don't feel that their businesses, and let's face it, businesses in New York City, especially small businesses, they live on the margin, right? And small changes can make the difference between making it, not making it. So they're necessarily conservative, right? And rightfully so. If you're going to change something, change the parameters and where they're doing business, that feels potentially threatening. If they're making it now, don't change anything. So, we really want to show them the data and show them the examples of other places where, we've added these environmental amenities, we've made the streets more accessible to people, and those businesses have thrived and done better. And, we can do a deep dive on that and say, what businesses do better and how did they do better? Like people sometimes like, well, city bikes, or putting a city bike here, is that going to make business better or worse? And, it'll turns out it makes it better, but it's not obvious to people at first. So I think, a lot of what working with business means is, making sure they're part of the process, making sure they're a stakeholder at the table with the community at the community meetings, because our business owners, especially our small business owners, can be the heart and soul of our neighborhoods. And we want them to thrive, and we want them to be a part of this process of greening while preserving, environmental justice and equity.
So we're going to take a few questions from our audience. So as I call you, you're going to be allowed to ask your question. So in lieu of people asking them themselves, we have a question from State Senator Roxanne Persaud. How do we convey to communities the seriousness?
In terms of the seriousness of climate change? Well, I think anybody who lived through Hurricane Sandy understands how serious that can be, how deadly serious climate change can be. And that was just the prelude, right? Things like Sandy are going to happen again, and they're going to become bigger and faster. And that's just what's baked in right now, right? That is, if we didn't add any more greenhouse gases to the atmosphere, we're going to have global warming over the rest of this century, right? The intense precipitation events that we've started to see, right? That's happening now. It's happening all over the world, and we're going to see that more and more. So we can certainly draw on the experience of Sandy to focus people's attention. Like, this is the kind of thing that we're talking about happening routinely. And that intense precipitation event that we saw last time, right? Those kinds of things are going to happen more often. And we're going to get the heat waves. And we haven't had a major heat wave, like they had in Chicago, they've had elsewhere in the world and in Europe yet. but it's coming and it will come here. And when it does, we're going to have problems keeping our electricity grid up. Like we're going to have trouble, getting people into cooling centers, right? So this is a problem, and a problem that increases, exponentially, not arithmetically. So it's going to be an order of magnitude worse 10 years from now than it is now, right? And our infrastructure is not prepared for this. None of our infrastructure, our electric grid, our transportation infrastructure, our healthcare infrastructure, none of it is prepared for this. So it's vitally important. It really is a life and death issue. If you see, the heat waves that have killed like lots of people in other parts of the world, I fear for my city and what's going to happen when that hits here, right? And so I understand it's a hard issue. People are always focused on, and rightfully so, on their day-to-day issues, right? Like, I got to make the rent, I got to put food on the table, I got to get to work, right? People have their own healthcare issues, and this seems kind of abstract. But it's not abstract because it's disasters, it's natural disasters and smaller, climate-related crises that are going to happen all the time, right? And it's going to be, people use this term, the new normal. Well, it's not really a normal. There's no new normal because the normal is going to get acceleratingly worse over our lifetimes, right? And we're not going to be able to avoid that. So treating like what's happening now as normal won't really help us 5 years from now, because this will be the good old days of climate change 5 years from now. And so I think focusing people, I think it's important to message that things are going to get worse, right? And I know that's not a popular political message, right? But in terms of climate, things are going to get worse. So we really have to have all hands on deck, right? To use a sports metaphor, this should be our 2-minute drill for getting this city ready for climate change. We again, you could also compare it to COVID. We were not ready for a pandemic, right? And that's probably not our last pandemic. So thinking of it in terms of these major crises that we have to have, part of building resilience is being able to address these like right away, right there on the spot, because we're having a hard time predicting these things too. Like hurricanes are developing now in 24 and 48 hours. And so we don't have as much lead time to put, emergency preparedness in place.
So I think that leads to a very much related question, and I'm going to combine a few people's questions. Caitlin Kawaguchi asked, thank you for that presentation. With those concerns, what do you think should be the top policy priorities that the party should encourage our electeds to support? Similarly, Christian Morales says, thank you for that excellent rundown of the climate challenges facing New Yorkers, Dr. Gould. Can you elaborate on some of your favorite policies that you would like to see working in New York City? And do any of them include attempts to not just decrease vulnerability to the effects of climate change, but also mitigate climate change itself?
Absolutely. And I just want to say the first, and it's not a specific policy because I will leave that to the housing policy experts, but affordable housing is absolutely critical intervention in climate justice, right? We're not going to achieve anything close to climate justice in New York City until we've achieved something close to housing justice in New York City, because housing is where people are going to, their home is where people are going to experience climate change most acutely. And while I'm talking, I've lost the last part of that question.
So essentially it was about legislation and also action to support that legislation.
Yeah, okay. So we also have to, in terms of mitigating climate, yes, cities going to play a critical role. And we don't know, the federal government, sometimes it's in and sometimes it's out on climate mitigation, but the city is in and has to continue to be in. So, in the first step of climate mitigation is electrify everything. I know everybody has heard this. But that means, electrifying, making sure our mass transit system is electrified, making sure that our buildings, I know we have, local laws in place and we're moving on that now, but making sure that's strong and enforced. We have to get our buildings into compliance. We have to reduce, because that is one of the place where we contribute most to climate change is our buildings, right? And so we really need to focus on that. We also need to think about how we eat and our food supply. And New York City is a food city. So if anybody's going to innovate, what's the best cuisine in the world that's climate change friendly? Like it's going to happen here. And that's a way we sell ourselves too, right? So climate mitigation and climate resilience is also a way that cities market themselves around the world, right? Like what makes a great city in the world today, right? It's climate resilience and climate mitigation. Getting that canopy, that tree canopy, expanded. There's work being done on trying to double the tree canopy in New York City. That will help our climate mitigation, right? We can fix carbon, we can secure carbon with those, while we're also addressing flooding issues from intense precipitation, and we're also addressing heat vulnerability. So trees are a win-win-win. They're even more of a win if you don't use leaf blowers to clean up after them, which are terrible for climate change, right? So we have to think about like electrifying the leaf blowers. So yes, we need to work on climate mitigation at the same time, because we're a big city. We can play a big role in that while we're working on resilience and adaptation.
And finally, I believe we have time for one more question. So, from Vladimir Edward, what resources would you suggest we seek out to further educate ourselves about these issues?
Well, in terms of, educating yourselves, like there's a vast wealth of information from, the organizations that are doing good work on this. And I'm going to do a shout out to 350 Brooklyn, which is a great organization, part of a national organization and international organization working on climate mitigation. But we have tremendous resources in the City University of New York as well. On Monday, we had a big meeting at the CUNY Graduate Center from people from all of our 25 campuses, talking about building a CUNY Climate Consortium for educating not just elected officials, but the entire New York City population on climate. I think we need to work on, in that regard, we need K through 12 climate education, and not just general climate education, but climate education that's focused on New York City, how climate affects New York City, and what we can do to make New York City less vulnerable and less contributing to climate change. And I think CUNY can be an enormous resource in this regard. It would be great. I know CUNY has a fabulous school of journalism. It has a fabulous school of public health. It could use a fabulous school of sustainability and climate justice. That would be a huge step forward. And we can, CUNY educates 300,000 students. We could educate 300,000 New Yorkers, right, on a regular cycle. And it would make your jobs of selling policy a lot easier if people had this background, in their K through 12 and then their college education.
Professor Gould, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. I know I got a lot out of it. We are going to share resources with our participants, and I'm sure there are a load of questions, so I might be sending some your way.
Great.
I'm going to turn it over to Arlene, who is our chair, to introduce our next moderator.
I have one question, because I'm a firm believer that our young people should also be at the table when we're having discussions on a planet that will be theirs when we're gone. And there's someone in the chat that is an anonymous attendee, and it says, is there a plan to include young people in the environmental discussion?
Well, young people are the key to all of this, right? Because when we think about climate justice, we usually think in terms of race and class, but we also need to think about intergenerational climate justice. And climate change may be the most important intergenerational justice issue, because on some level, we ate our grandchildren's lunch, right? We added all this carbon to the atmosphere, which means they can no longer do that. We got a lot of goodies from, we got like nice cars, we had nice economic growth out of that, and they're not going to be able to have that in the same way. And we're going to live out, I'm in my 60s, right? So I'm not going to be here forever. right? But my grandchildren are going to be here for a lot longer. So it's their patrimony that we're leaving to them, right? And so they have more skin in this game than any of us do. So they have to be a part of this conversation. And so what the community meetings could be, hold them at the schools, hold them with the young people in the neighborhood. Don't let anybody over 18 at one of these meetings. Just let the young people talk to you about their vision of greening in their community and their vision of what a future is. And again, part of their ability to participate effectively in that kind of conversation is that K through 12 education in climate change, climate justice, and again, climate change and climate justice as it affects New York City, as it affects our community. I think that's absolutely essential. So thank you for bringing that up.
No, thank you for answering that and you know, a bunch of other questions that I'm sure that our viewers were taking notes, and I hope that they were, because this is important. You know, tomorrow is not guaranteed for our children the way that we keep on, you know, messing up our climate. The environment is suffering, and we're gonna suffer with it, and our children are gonna suffer with them as well. So thank you very much for being with us. I really honestly appreciate it. Now we're gonna move along with our next segment, which Igor will be the one to moderate it. So thank you, Igor, and it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Arlene. It indeed was very informative, and that's why I'm so excited to introduce our next panelist for our second part of our very informative policy forum meeting. That's why I'm so grateful to Radniz Bichat-Carmelin, our chair, and Yamil Miller, our executive director, for convening that very important and timely and timeless policy forum with so much important information presented. And it's a true honor for me to present our next panelist, James Lloyd. James has served as the Director of Policy at the New York State Association for Affordable Housing since the beginning of 2022. James has worked in New York land use and housing since 2020, including 4 years in the New York City Council's Land Use Division. While in City Council, he served as a project manager for the East New York and Inwood neighborhood rezonings, and was also part of the council's MIH ZQA team. James holds an Master of Science in City and Regional Planning from the Pratt Institute, and Master of Art in Geography from Ohio University, and Bachelor of Art in Physics for Carleton College. James also spent 17 years in the United States Navy, including 9 years on active duty with 2 deployments into the Middle East, and he retired as a commander in September 2022. Thank you so much for your service to our country.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, and thank you all for this opportunity to speak on this vital topic. So a little introduction, thank you for that. I, live in Brooklyn myself. I live in Flatbush, Community District 17, represented by Assemblymember Cunningham, Senator Myrie, and Councilmember Joseph. So very happy to be here. So happy to participate in this important evening. A little bit about my organization, NYSAFA, New York State Association of Affordable Housing. We're the statewide affordable housing trade association. And so our 400 members build, develop, operate, design, finance the vast majority of affordable housing across the city and state. So thank you so much again. So I don't have slides, unlike the professor, so I'll try to equal him in terms of content. So I think to give an overview, affordable housing is a big topic, but there really, there's affordable housing, but there's also housing affordability, right? And I think, we talk about formal capital A affordable housing, where you have to income qualify. There's a regulatory agreement between the owner of the building and the city or the state. There's a lot of subsidy involved. People talk about what AMI is it, right? 60 AMI, 80 AMI. But there's also the broader topic of housing affordability, right? Which is just, what does your rent look like today? How many homeless people are there? And they're related, and affordable housing can help mitigate housing affordability challenges, but there's distinct to a certain degree in policy. So first, I want to talk a little bit about housing affordability, sort of what is happening across the region. So, we have a regional housing market, right? So oftentimes you see the maps of New York City and they always end at the county line, and then there's just blank space. Well, it turns out people, also shop for housing in New Jersey and Westchester and Long Island. So the policies they make there affects what happens here too. And broadly speaking, housing affordability, what the rents pay or how much it costs to buy a house, is driven by supply and demand, right? Just like toasters or televisions or anything else. And homelessness is predominantly a problem of lack of housing supply. So this is sort of the underlying, and you talk to economists and they always point to this. And in New York, we have a jobs housing mismatch, right? So, New York has sort of set up an economic development machine. And over the last 10 years, across the state, they've created 1.2 million jobs, right? And that's a lot of jobs, but only 400,000 housing units. So when you do that, you create a supply and demand mismatch, a crunch, and then you watch as rents go up and up and up and up and up, as we've all experienced. So, the state has to build about 817,000 units of housing over the next 10 years just to keep pace. So that is like the fundamental sort of, millstone that's really grinding working families. And that's sort of why I am motivated to be in affordable housing in this space, to try to mitigate that incredible pressure that families feel. And there are different policy solutions bandied around, rent control, for instance, rent stabilization. I have a rent stabilized apartment. It's pretty great, right? I can't complain. But it also benefits the people who have it, right? If you're a working person, a poor person, you want to get into an apartment, often a landlord might charge key money, right? Which is a legal fee to get that unit. So if there isn't enough supply out there, the poor people still sort of end up in the cold. So that's sort of, the big challenge of housing affordability. Now to move on to, capital A, affordable housing, that is, the city is able to build 5,000 to 6,000 units a year of affordable housing, right? And that they build that using federal funds, so federal low-income housing tax credits, and they also do it using city capital. So New York City spends about $1.5 billion a year in taxpayer money to essentially to finance affordable housing, and they're unique in the country. In fact, the city spends more than the state does of its own money. So the state spends $900 million a year in capital. The city actually spends $1.5 billion. And honestly, New York City spends more than any city or state in America on affordable housing, which is a testament to the need and the priority that it is here in New York City. It's really the epicenter for affordable housing in the country. But that is all to say that when you take that funds and the federal resources, you can get 5,000 to 6,000 units of affordable housing in 100% affordable buildings, so subsidized buildings, a year. The only way you get more than that is in a mixed income building, I think the professor alluded to. So mixed income buildings typically are financed with some sort of tax program. Typically, historically, that has been 421A. So that is sort of how you grow the pie beyond the 5,000 to 6,000 units a year to something higher. But in terms of the overall, picture of what affordable housing can do, we are always advocating for more resources, more city capital, more federal low-income housing tax credits, more ways to get more production out of the system. But let's I think put it into perspective. New York City, and again, this is linking affordable housing and housing affordability together, right? New York City built 180,000 total housing units over the last 10 years. Tokyo built 100. Tokyo is just slightly larger than New York, maybe 12 million people. Tokyo built 150,000 units every year for the last 25 years. They have a 19% vacancy rate, and the average rent for a 2-bedroom is $1,300. So in terms of, they really took the brakes off and achieved genuine housing affordability. And 5,000 to 6,000 units of affordable housing a year is great, but nothing can make up for that huge amount of supply. And I suppose I'll just, before we go to questions, I'll just talk a little bit about sort of why we are where we are today and why we don't build very much compared with other places. So, the city and the state have really restrictive zoning. So the New York City was completely rezoned in 61. And then under Mayor Bloomberg, a lot of the city was downzoned again. So that makes it really hard just because you can't build apartments in that many places. People don't necessarily see that because they see downtown Brooklyn, Long Island City, where there are a lot of skyscrapers, but it's sort of like you push down everywhere and then the pressure shoots up in the few places where you can build, right? And then, and then of course, all the suburbs, you can really just build single family homes and they're built out. And then the only other thing is tax, right? So everyone's favorite topic, 421A, everyone loves it, super, not controversial at all, right? But I'll tell you, New York City, the ratio between what a building pays, a rental building pays, to what a single family home pays in property tax per unit is 6.4 to 1. So a rental building pays more in property tax than almost any other building, major city in America, right? So that is one of the things really tough. And so renters may not realize that they're actually a huge amount of their rent is going towards property tax. So yeah, and with that, I think I've blown past my 5 minutes. So I think it's time for questions at this point.
Thank you, James. It was very informative, as I had expected. As a Democratic district leader for 45th Assembly District, which I guess probably not everybody knows, it includes Midwood, Shipstead Bay, Brighton Beach, Manhattan Beach. And many of my constituents is asking what existing state and city laws impact the availability and affordability of housing in New York City. And also are there specific policies that have proven effective? And are there any areas that you think might be needed improvement? Actually, I want to know that we have many senators. I do know that State Senator Preston Wood has joined us. Thank you so much. And we have city council members who are district leaders, assembly members who are district leaders. So maybe you can give some suggestions, advice. Thank you so much in advance.
No, absolutely. So, like I said, I think to start with the strengths, right? We do have very good policies in terms of affordable housing funding and production here in New York City. So that is, HPD, HCR, really incredibly strong agencies, and that's really important. And in terms of overall, I think one of the big strengths of development in New York City is that we have as of right development. So if you go to places like California, zoning is almost irrelevant because they can deny whatever, they can deny your project no matter what. But here, at least we have as of right development. But there's still lots of other challenges. So I already mentioned the tax issue. For one, when you have extremely high taxes on something, you don't get very much of it, right? It discourages that, whatever that is. If you want to, not have people not smoke, you tax cigarettes a lot. Well, we do the same thing, but with housing, right? Because of the property taxes on housing. So that's always a topic. That's mostly what REBNY talks about. But, there are other issues. We mentioned zoning, for instance. So, the mayor has a current zoning proposal, City of Yes for housing opportunity. It's just sort of entering, the public realm right now. That would go a long way towards helping with housing affordability, right? It would sort of have every neighborhood allow a little bit more housing. Oftentimes, it would just allow what was already built 100 years ago to be legal or to be built again. So that would help, it would address parking requirements, would allow small scale residential buildings, and it would give a zoning bonus. So it would give a 20% zoning bonus for affordable housing across the city. And then another thing, given we have state legislatures here, I want to state legislators here, I want to highlight, the need to reform environmental review. So New York State is only one of 6 states in America that requires environmental review for zoning changes. And it not only does it make it really expensive and longer, but it also opens it up to a lot of litigation. So there's a bill S925A4933, sponsored by Senator May and Assemblymember Kellis, and that would streamline environmental review if it's infill, apartment buildings that have sewers and so on and so forth. So, I really think that's the kind of thing that we need to look at, because it's really tax, zoning, and environmental review together that make housing so unaffordable because supply just can't meet demand. Are there any, would you like me to elaborate, or should we move on to the next?
Igor, would you allow me to ask a question?
Sure, would be happy to.
Thank you. I get a lot of calls and questions about how can I, get into affordable housing? And, the answer is always, you got to go through Housing Connect. But then, people always ask, well, I filled out that application so many odd years ago, and I, they update their application ever so often, but they never get a call. So I'm always being asked, what is the criteria to have a better chance at being called for these units, affordable units?
No, absolutely. They're obviously very popular, right? Always oversubscribed, as they say. 40,000 people apply for 40 units. There are for one, there are a few sort of tricks of the trade, right? For one, you should make sure that you income qualify, right? So you have to make sure you're in that income bracket. Make sure your documents are fresh, and are recent, and then apply for something that's in your community district. So I think the professor mentioned it in the previous panel. Half of units in affordable buildings are reserved for residents of that community district, right? So if you live in that community district and you income qualify, you have a much better shot. Similarly, there's a small set aside for city employees. So if you're a city employee and you income qualify, you actually have a fabulous shot. In fact, I used to work at city council, and I know folks who work in government. And I always tell folks, if you just got a city job, go apply for affordable housing today, while you still don't make very much money. So I think that would be my other tip. Make sure your documents are complete, they're fresh because they get stale after a few months, right? And that you income qualify, and the best leg up is to apply to something that was built in your community district.
Thank you. Igor, you have questions? Yeah, I think we have some questions in the chat. Not in the Q&A. We have Katriana Yvonne. And the question is, what is affordable housing if it's not affordable? I prefer not to call it affordable housing, but how do we lower the AMI to reflect the income of the borough?
No, absolutely. This is always a hot topic. Essentially the amount, how much rent is charged, right? Because these are typically brand new buildings when they come online. And so how affordable they are is really dependent on how much money the city is putting into the project, and what the various priorities are, right? So, the AMI figure, right, is area median income, is a regional figure determined by HUD. And it's set where it's set for multiple reasons. One, to reflect the income of the area, and also because it affects Section 8 qualification. But in terms of why is a building at one level versus another level, and how that reflects affordability. So, 15% of the units are reserved for formerly homeless. So those are already set, and those are going towards voucher holders. 60% of area median income is the bulk of them, because that is driven by the federal low-income housing tax credit. And you have to average a lot of the units around 60% of the area median income. So that is sort of determines it. And they consider you not income burden, not rent burden, if you're not paying more than 30% of your income on rent. So that is sort of how they arrive at that figure. Ultimately you're paying under market for a brand new unit, often has a washer, dryer, so on and so forth in it, or amenities in the buildings. I have one block away from me, Caton Flats. And I did a tour of it recently and it was pretty remarkable. So, that's sort of a long way of saying sort of how we've ended up where we are today, in terms of it. But, the more the more money the city puts in, the more affordable it will be. And as an example of sort of the tension, the push and pull, right? There's a legislation in the council right now, Intro 1218, which would make everything affordable housing, make it all prevailing wage on the job sites. And for instance, that would double the amount of money the city would have to spend per unit. And so you would either get half as much affordable housing or it'd be a lot less affordable than it is today. So there are all these tensions, right? Do you want to pay a carpenter $100 an hour or $230,000 a year? If you're already unhappy with how affordable the housing is today, right? It's all these public policy priorities. So totally hear you. A lot of push and pull.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have many questions, but may have many myself, but I prefer to ask questions that many other people are asking because I don't want to monopolize. So one of the questions that I saw from Tony Malone, thanks for the information. How much of a difference do you think it would make to end the landmark restrictions that prevent any new housing from being built in the Park Slope Historic District?
You're trying to get me in trouble, I think.
It was not my question.
Yeah. I always say that. I'm just asking for a friend.
I even said the name of the person. Right.
So, look, I think we think that affordable housing and preservation can work together. So obviously, some folks say, hey, more and more of the city is being covered in landmark districts, and is this okay? And for us, we view that a lot of this can work together. So we've partnered with the Preservation League on legislation around the state historic tax credit. There are a lot of places where you can rehabilitate a building using historic tax credits and turn it into affordable housing. So we definitely think that you can do everything together. However, I think there is, to a certain degree, if you want more housing, sometimes the buildings are going to be taller, right? And that is just a fact. And if do you care about solving homelessness or tall buildings, right? So, for instance, there's a all affordable building being proposed in the West Village right now by the city on city-owned land, and there's a lot of controversy because it's going to be tall, but it's going to be all affordable. And so, it's like, for me, I would say I'll take the tall building and all the housing that goes along with it. But that's a certain degree. It's what are your priorities and what do you think the most important thing is? But, the Landmarks Commission just approved a affordable mixed income building in Soho, NoHo in a historic district. So clearly you can do it. So thanks.
All right, great. Were you able to pull any more questions, Igor, or we're moving on to our next, because we have another panelist on the line. It is Carmen Agnat, but I don't see her. Carmen, are you there? Are you able to hear us? I don't see Carmen. Is she in a waiting room? Sabrina, are you able to hear me? There she
Michelle,
goes. I see her now.
they're renamed as me. Hold on one moment.
Yes, but I know who she is. Welcome, Carmen. I hope you don't.
Hello. And we
name.
also have Michelle de la Us also is on.
Oh, okay. Well, we're getting tag teamed here. Hello, Michelle. How are you? Welcome. So I guess Igor may have some questions for you as well, because he's pulling questions out of the Q&A. But first, I would like for you to introduce yourself. So we're gonna start with Michelle.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for the invitation. Can you hear me okay? Literally, while I was on, my computer has decided to die. So I am on my phone. It is like rebooting every 30 seconds. So I had pictures to show and all kinds of things. So I'm Michelle Delos. I'm the executive director of the Fifth Avenue Committee, which is a 45-year-old nonprofit comprehensive community development corporation whose mission is to advance economic, social, and racial justice in New York City. We're based in Brooklyn.
Now we have Carmel.
Hi, everyone. My name is Carmel Agnet, and I'm a graduate research assistant at Medgar Evers College. I'm also a student studying political science at the Graduate Center.
Okay, great. Thank you. Welcome. We've been asking a few questions, and now I think Igor is gonna have to dig a little deeper into that list and get you know, you have questions, so I know you do.
Yeah, I would be happy to. From Erica Perez, who is regulating the amount of private shelters that we are oversaturating in Brooklyn?
Wait, before you continue, can we just give Carmel an opportunity? I think she had a presentation to share with us all.
Okay.
That would be great.
Oh yeah, thank you. I'm not the best at questions, but I'll try. Let's see. It says host disabled participant screen sharing. Let's see. Is there any way to share the screen?
Sabrina, you're able to. Sabrina should be able to help you with that at her end.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I got it. It's 5 minutes, very brief. Okay. So thank you everyone today for having me here to talk about affordable housing. I'm a researcher with Medgar Evers College. And I'm fairly new to affordable housing, but I have enough information to be able to inform the group tonight. So with that, I will begin. Erin Carr from the Housing Rights Initiative in an article with the city said, at the end of the day, housing shouldn't be a lottery, it should be a right. Rafael Sestero in the same article says, we can't build our way out of that crisis for the lowest income people. It's about having enough income to be able to afford even the most affordable rent. And so these two individuals touch at, two important points, that affordable housing is a right and affordable housing belongs to everyone. So I believe, this was already explained already, but, in the discussion of affordable housing, it's important to think about, what exactly is affordable housing and why. And so according to the New York City Housing Preservation and Development, housing is considered affordable if it costs about 1/3 or less of household income and is regulated so the rent can't go up dramatically over time. And affordable housing is distinct in that it is both subsidized and regulated. So it's subsidized in its construction and regulated as rent stabilization. And why? Why do we want affordable housing? Because affordable housing provides a home without a burdening cost of rent or mortgage. Individuals and families can utilize their remaining 70% of income on paying bills, on emergency needs, and meaningful recreation. And it's all about the little things, having a home is where people meet their needs, to be able to have a permanent space of rest, to work, to go to school comfortably and nearby, to create memories with friends and families while also providing a foundation of stability. And these go back to the point that housing is definitely a right and everyone should have access to affordable housing, especially those who are extremely low income and low income. So a popular question is, why is affordable housing so unaffordable? The thing is, affordable housing is affordable, but it's relative. So The 2023 AMI for the New York City region is $127,100 for a 3-person family. And developers utilize this to set guidelines to renting costs for developments and city financed affordable projects. But the problem is the New York City AMI doesn't reflect the local neighborhood AMIs in such an economically diverse city. So just to provide an example of what I'm talking about, I put together East Flatbush and Flatbush together to show the impact of the New York City-wide AMI. So in East Flatbush and Flatbush, they're both at risk for displacement because most of the households in the neighborhoods, the poverty rate increased. The median household income is around 60, 70, which is nowhere close to 127,000. And affordable housing units at 120% AMI and 80% AMI are vastly more abundant than, affordable units at 30% AMI. There's only 9.2% available units at 30% AMI, which is not enough for the community. It doesn't fit the economic profile of the community. There's way too many, there's a disproportionate amount of buildings for one kind of AMI and not the other. But this is an example. This is an example of case studies that are affected by the New York City AMI. Also, in both neighborhoods, more than half of households need affordable housing that is less than 80% AMI specifically. So some, I think, solutions that would be helpful here is a development and lottery pause. Lotteries are unresponsive because there are a large amount of low-income applicants and there are unavailable or small pool of high-income applicants to subsidize rental profits. Commitment to truly affordable and equitable housing, rezoning to allow community input. That as of right, community zoning doesn't allow community input. Increasing in multifamily housing, so there's a decrease in overcrowding. A right to a decent living and housing dignity. A lot of these affordable housing units, they provide opportunities for also decent living and reasonable standards of living. However, low-income households often live their lives in dilapidated housing. Increased wages, the underlying pinch in affordability is source of income. There are people who will chronically be low income. They won't make more than they're making now. So the underlying pinch in that is increasing the wage. And finally, banning warehousing and combination practices. Property owners have warehoused rent stabilized properties and wealthy residents combine properties to build bigger homes in New York City. These practices decrease housing supply. And so these are some of the solutions I see to affordable housing. And thank you all.
Gotten my computer to work again if folks want to see a couple pictures.
Oh, I'm looking at questions. Let's see.
Good evening, everyone. Yes, Michelle, could you please tell us a little bit more about what you do and the pictures that you were going to showcase? Thank you.
Sure. Okay. You'll just have to allow me to share. So as I mentioned, so one of the things that the Fifth Avenue Committee does is build and manage affordable housing. We're actually a member of NYSAFA, so a lot of what James said, covers a lot of the things. So we're actually in the trenches, actually building the housing. And one of the things I wanted to show you was a picture of a ribbon cutting ceremony and share that we just had yesterday for New York City's first 100% affordable housing over new and expanded public library in Sunset Park. Just say that the process of that, it's the first ever to combine those two things, but it also, it's something I proposed over 15 years ago. FAC waited many, many years to get the subsidy dollars, the low income housing tax credit, and the, you know, city subsidy and the state subsidy dollars in order to build that. So to James's point, 100% affordable housing projects are just a piece of the puzzle in terms of solving our affordable housing crisis in New York City and New York State. If anybody could let me share my screen, that would be great.
Yes, I believe you have access to share now.
Okay, let me try that. Ah, perfect. Oh, there we go. So, really a big part of it is, going back to the supply issue, which was mentioned, but just so we can host this. So this is yesterday's ribbon cutting ceremony in Sunset Park. You can see we had Deputy Mayor Maria Torres Springer there. We had HCR Commissioner Ruth Ann Visnaskis. We have, Assemblywoman Marcela Matenis. We have State Senator Andrew Gennardis here. We have Julio Peña, male district leader. Like this, it took a small village of support to get this project done. And it was 50 units of affordable housing, and over 60,000 people applied, including 4,000 people from the local community in Sunset Park. It's the first new affordable housing in Sunset Park for families, 100% affordable, in over 20 years, new affordable housing. This is Jaime Torres. He's one of the residents in the building. He's been renting rooms in the neighborhood basically for decades. Moving house to house as rents went up, basically. He was one of the lucky people who got one of the lottery units. So, he got the local community board preference. He met the income guidelines. He completed the housing application properly. He got his paperwork in on time when asked. And, now he lives in an affordable, rent regulated, rent stabilized, unit. So I share this, but I want to share a couple other things, and some of these things people may have seen over the years. But I think it's always important to provide context for so how, what are some of the ways, how did we get here? How is it that it's so bad, right? Well, it starts, of course, this is the redlining map of Brooklyn from 1938 from the Homeowners Loan Corporation. Basically, when the federal government during the New Deal really cemented segregation in our country across 240 municipalities. And so red and yellow areas, which had Black and brown people, but also Jews and Irish and Italians, were places where the federal government wasn't going to insure mortgage loans, something that was new. A 30-year mortgage was something new at that time. The blue and green were areas that were deemed to be safe. But this, if you look at this, this led to lots of disinvestment for decades, and then more recently, depending on the community, hyper investment. And then, okay, let me pull it. I'm going to stop sharing. So this looks at displacement risk. So this is from the New York City Department of City Planning and HPD, and you see the various community boards across the 5 boroughs, and the various colors, basically from a beige to an eggplant purple, and what their displacement risks. Fifth Avenue Committee, we serve low and moderate income people citywide, but we're based in Community Board 6, but we serve folks in Community Board 6, 7, 8, 10. I mean, all over Brooklyn, but we serve low and moderate income people citywide. And you can see there's, the risk is very concentrated in a lot of communities of color. And a lot of communities that haven't seen a lot of new development of housing overall. And so that's definitely a factor. I wanted to share, I'm going to go to yet another slide here. This is like the picture is worth 1,000 words kind of a situation. So here's a slide that kind of describes what's been going on with overall housing production over the last 25 or so years in the region. So not just the city of New York, excuse me, but parts of Long Island, Mid-Hudson, Lower Hudson, New Jersey, Metro, Metro core and periphery, and then Southwest Connecticut, because, people look for housing where they can afford housing and where that is, proximate to their job, right? And so a lot of this is based on transit connections that people have, obviously less so today than it was years ago, or I should say before the pandemic. Now with remote work and more telecommuting, it's a little less, but still it gives you an idea. But, we are not producing as much housing as we did just a few years ago. But meanwhile, the population has increased, more jobs have been created. It's really only New York City and New Jersey Metro core that are producing more than we did a few years ago. We're carrying this entire region, right? We're carrying the housing for this entire region. Like, the reality is Long Island, Westchester, Connecticut, they need to do more. They need to do more to help solve the housing crisis that exists in the area, and which is one of the reasons why Governor Hochul's proposal for the housing compact, was a very important proposal that failed, primarily because of political reasons. And from a policy perspective, it's exactly what we needed to be talking about. So, and then the last thing I wanted to show you guys, you might have seen this. FAC is also a member of the Association for Neighborhood and Housing Development. So this is the AMI cheat sheet. Carmel talked about, the 100% of AMI for a family of 3 being this $127,100, but the fact that AMI in New York City is actually much lower for that in a lot of communities. I think the argument about AMI, honestly, is not necessarily one that is worth a tremendous amount of time, because in the end, it's all about subsidy dollars, whether it's rental subsidy or capital subsidy or some other form of subsidy to get to the affordability levels that you actually want to reach. And so I don't want to, if we're going to expend political capital on things, I want to expend political capital on things that matter in people's lives. And so to me, that's the rental subsidy, the capital subsidy, and other things. But it's really, what's really clear here, right, is that the majority of New Yorkers are, extremely low to moderate income, right? You see that the share of renter households, it's over 70%, right, are moderate income, low income, very low, and extremely low. And then you see the share of rent burden households, the households that are paying more than 30% of their income in rent. It's the poorest people who are extremely rent burdened. This housing crisis doesn't impact people equally across the income bands, right? Which is why we both need to have targeted affordable housing and also increase supply overall. But we also need to also think about raising wages and or providing rental subsidies so that people can afford it. So, housing, it's not cheaper to build affordable housing. And to actually manage affordable housing, like it's over $750 a month to manage housing without a mortgage and without taxes, right? So that gives you a sense of what the rent needs to be just to cover costs, right? The insurance costs, the utility costs, the cost of your maintenance staff, right? So that's not a lot of rent in the end, but it doesn't have the property taxes in it, and it doesn't have any mortgage costs. So, we have a real disconnect between the cost of actually owning and managing housing and what the incomes are of people that can support the rents that will actually pay those costs. And so there's a lot that we have to do from a public policy perspective at all levels of government to close that gap. But one of the biggest ways is that we absolutely need to increase supply and increase supply in a targeted way for low income people. So I'll stop there. No more pictures.
All right, thank you so much. And between the three of you, wow, I have a new perspective on this affordable housing situation between James, Carmel, and Michelle. Wow, I'm really speechless. I have to say thank you so much, because now we have more information to give out to our constituents. It's not easy for us to talk about something that we don't know, but now I can't say I don't know. So I have you guys to thank for all of that. And going back to something James said, that he wished that he had, screen to share, or, just, something so that the viewers can see what he was talking about. The two of you did exactly what he was talking about. I mean, it's amazing. He said it, the two of you said it, and you actually showed it in print. So I really, truly appreciate that. Thank you. In this, I don't know if there are any questions, because, you guys, I had questions, you answered before I asked them. It was so it was so informative that you left no question unanswered, even though you didn't know the question. So I really, really do appreciate it. So I don't know if Igor has anything that he would want to, to say. Igor?
Thank you. I just second whatever you just said. It was very informative. And thank you for coming. It's really appreciated.
Absolutely. I'll say, Michelle has probably forgotten more about housing than I've ever learned. So, it's really wonderful to have her perspective on here as a NYSAFA member.
Yeah, no, definitely. You get different perspectives. It's the same information, but you're able to share it in such a way that if I understood it from one, someone else may understand it from the other. So one way or another, everybody's getting the same information, just in different words, and it works. To me, it really does work. So I truly appreciate it. On this call, we have two additional individuals who are very much so part of this whole process. We have District Leader Dion Brown Jordan and former District Leader and current Community Liaison Renee Collymore. Each one of them has done their own research in their own communities and their own districts based on what they were interested in. And we're gonna start with Dion, so she could tell us a little bit about herself and what district she represents, and also why was she so why she felt that the climate justice it impacts her district. So Dion, introduce yourself, please. Unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Arlene. I appreciate your introduction. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dion Brown Jordan. I am very pleased to be here with you this evening. I am the female district leader for the 46th Assembly District. And in my district, I represent Seagate, Coney Island, Brighton Beach, parts of Gravesend, Bath Beach, Dyker Heights, and Bay Ridge. So I live in Coney Island, a community of over 50,000 residents. Most of you are aware that Coney Island is on a peninsula with a creek to the north and the Atlantic Ocean to the south. I hope I got that right. I'm sort of geographically challenged. So 12 years ago, the Coney Island community was trounced by Superstorm Sandy, which hit during high tide. During the storm, the surge waters near Seagate, a private community on the west end, an area I also represent, reached 11 feet above ground level. So I learned that much of that water did not come directly from the ocean, but from the creek. The developing flood disrupted elevators, power, heat, and hot water, you name it, in all of the existing high-rise buildings in Coney Island. It took weeks to restore service to all residents. Now, according to local environmentalists, if a Sandy-like storm were to hit Coney Island today, the impact would be even more extreme because the oceans are higher than they were just a decade ago due to climate change. The report also mentioned that if the worst possibilities come to pass, significant portions of coastal Brooklyn, like neighborhoods on Jamaica Bay, Williamsburg, Red Hook, Bay Ridge, Sunset Park, and others, could in the coming decades be underwater and unlivable with storms like Hurricane Sandy becoming more regular occurrences. This is very, very troubling and scary. So here are 5 ways to help with climate change. One is to spread the word, encourage your friends, family, and coworkers to reduce their carbon pollution. Number 2, keep up the political pressure. Lobby local politicians and businesses to support efforts to cut emissions and reduce carbon pollution. Number 3, transform your transport, which means transport accounts for around a quarter of all greenhouse gas emissions and across the world. Many governments are implementing policies to decarbonize travel. Okay, you can get a head start by leaving your car at home and walk or cycle whenever possible. Number 4, rein in your power use. If you can, switch to a zero carbon or renewable energy provider. Install solar panels on your roof. Be more efficient. Turn your heating down a degree or 2 if possible. And number 5, shop local and buy sustainable. To reduce your food's carbon footprint, buy local and seasonal foods. You'll be helping small businesses and farms in your area and reducing fossil fuel emissions associated with transport and cold chain storage. Thank you all for attending tonight's meeting. I appreciate each and every one of you, and I hope you got a lot out of what was shared tonight. Have a great evening and an even better Friday. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dion. I actually remember what Coney Island looked like.
Yeah.
Just hours after Superstorm Sandy hit. I was out there doing my own, I was not a district leader yet, but I was out there doing what I was called to do, which was volunteer. So I appreciate you bringing back those memories. Those are the things that keep me going.
Yes.
So now we have, like I said before, former district leader and currently a community liaison, Renee Collymore, who she did her research on the affordable housing, which is also an issue in the district that she lives in. So Renee, it's all yours.
Hi, thank you so much, everybody. And I am Renee Collymore, your Democratic liaison for the 57th Assembly District, Fort Greene, Clinton Hill, Prospect Heights, Crown Heights, a little bit of Bed-Stuy. And so we're here tonight, and everything has been said, but I would just like to add a few things due to the interest of time. You said something that was very important: close the gap. We have to close the gap. I'm a neighborhood kid. I'm one of those that was born and raised right here on the same block in the same house. And my family originated here, come here from 1940s. We've been here since the 1940s, right here in Fort Greene, Clinton Hill. And one of the problems that so many of our constituents say to us all of the time is, Renee, I'm born here like you, but I want to stay here, but we cannot afford this rent. We cannot afford, the rent is too high, and they're building these new buildings and we still can't afford it. We cannot get into the affordable housing lottery and the like. What can we do? And so I would like to say that That is so important because this district was primarily, it was always a nice mixed district. However, the economic bracket has changed, right? And so if it wasn't for my parents buying the house that we have now, at the time it was $6,000, right? $6,000. But now, if it wasn't for them, the cost of that house, I know that I would not be able to afford if I was to buy that house right now. So because of that insight and because they understood what it is to invest in their community, that's why I'm here. And there are others like me here doing the same thing, trying to hang on. Affordability, that gives a great opportunity for diversity, for us to keep diversity, which is good. Diversity is good to raise your children, and equity. And so one of the things that I have presented many times before in the past is that, and I have been leading this charge, talking about this for a few years now. It's called the Tiny House, New York City's first tiny house village for the homeless. But now I think I should include the tiny house idea to include for the affordable housing program. Because tiny houses are so much more economical to build than big buildings, right? And so we could keep our families, of people of color, and so many people who may not be in that bracket financially, to stay in wonderful neighborhoods, Crown Heights and Prospect Heights, by how we have so many empty lots that are here that we have sold to developers for $1, right? We could take those same lots and build a number of houses on those lots so that we can preserve folks like me. Thank you. That's all I want to say tonight. I know we're late. I'm Renee Collingwood, and thank you for hearing from me.
Renee, thank you so much. I think we all, thank our parents for doing what they did, decades ago, which is buy a home so that we can live in a semi-affordable and stable home, that we don't have to be, thinking about, are we going to be able to afford the rent in a couple of months when the landlord comes and says, we're raising your rent. So I'm happy for that as well. My parents did the same thing, and I'm benefiting from their good thoughts. So I think that we covered a lot this evening, and I believe I have our executive director, Yamil Miller, on the line, and he's, I think, going to give us our farewell. Yamil?
Thank you so much, Arlene. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Well, good evening, Brooklyn. As you know, my name is Yamil Spate Miller, and I'm the executive director of the Kings County Democratic County Organization. So you've heard from our county leader earlier this evening, the Honorable Radnice Bichat-Hermelin. You've heard from Sabrina Gates, that voice in the background who has been navigating through this, and our partners. Also, our county committee chair, district leader, Arlene Alvarado Macala, and of course, our panelists who has served tonight as our subject matter experts in this conversation that is robust, alive, and is going to change people's lives after tonight. As you know, our panelists have provided this information and has equipped us with some active knowledge on popular issues, but I always like to drop this, a little knowledge on Brooklyn. Brooklyn, from the political side, we have 22 assembly districts, and this party represents millions. These conversations and issues, regardless of party, regardless of status or opinion, it affects each and every one of us. And as a county organization, we are proud to put issues that matter to Brooklyn most on the table. Meetings like these provide each of you a solid background and further knowledge on how we can bring our issues to the table, which is through civic engagement, but ultimately legislation with our electeds across this county. As you know, what Brooklyn does, it sets the tone across this nation because we are one of the largest Democratic county organizations in America. So we have now extended an opportunity for all of you to send in your questions that you may think of as tonight go on, as we talked about climate change and affordable housing, which will never be an ending conversation because we are an evolving county. You can send those questions in. Our subject matter experts will be apprised of those questions because we are not here to answer them. We are here to provide you the fruit to get to the solution and provide the knowledge on how you can navigate them. We also want to thank our community liaison, Renee Collymore, and District Leader Dion Brown Jordan, who provided their insight as they represent constituents and individuals that are impacted significantly as well by climate change and affordable housing. And then finally, Brooklyn, on behalf of our county leader, our executive officers, members of the county committee, the elected district leaders, and as well as our elected officials who's joined us tonight, we want to thank you for this opportunity to allow us to present on our 2023 going into 2024 issues and policy meeting. And as you know, the county organization has committees that cover, of course, climate change and housing. So if you want to dig deeper and be a part of a further robust conversation, we also encourage you to send us an email so we can continue to keep this conversation going. As you know, this is a holiday month, and before we blink our eyes, we will be in 2024. So if we don't get an opportunity to get Brooklyn on a call like this before the end of the year or see you all, we wish you all a safe and happy holiday. We wish best of health to your families, to your neighbors, and to those that you cherish most. On that note, we want to say thank you and have a great evening, Brooklyn.